to move things over to the NBA, obviously we're in, I don't know if in almost done the conference finals. The Timberwolves recently just won Game 4 to avoid a sweep, which to say for the Indiana Pacers, who are the team that we're going to talk about, they could not do the same thing against the Celtics. They got swept, and I think they're a really interesting team to talk about, just because of the fact that going into the playoffs, I believe they were a 6 seed. They're 47-35. It was a bit of a surprise run. Not to say that this wasn't a good roster, wasn't a talented roster going into the playoffs, but you look at them, and I think before the bracket started, before we played any games, I don't think anybody would have had them going to the conference finals. And I think even though they got swept, I think it's important to kind of point out that this was still a competitive series. I mean, you look game. They're the only one that's not that wasn't really a close game was Game 2, because you've got Game 4, Celtics won by 3. Game 3, Celtics also won by 3. Game 2 was the one that wasn't competitive. Celtics won by 16. And then Game 1 was in overtime, and that game was the one where the Pacers were about to win, and then Jaylen Brown had that game-tying 3-point that was a bit of a miracle shot. And so you look at this team and say, this team was, even though they got swept, conceivably like going blow for blow with what's probably the best team left in the NBA playoffs. And despite that, they're still a young team that has lots of young talent, and is still kind of developing. Where do you see this Pacers team kind of going in the future, Simon? Do you think this is success that's sustainable and can potentially even be improved to championship level, or do they need to do a lot to get past where they went this season?
I don't know. I personally think that they have a lot of the youth and talent and depth across the board to really pull it off. I think it's sustainable. To immediately answer your question, I like a lot of what I see from the Pacers. I mean, they've got the star and they've got a lot of the guys around him, like Tyrese Halliburton. At this point, I feel like there's been enough said about how insanely good of a player he is, especially with how good he was in the regular season leading up to the playoffs, and he was a huge part outside of the 2 games he missed of their run. So obviously, I think he's gonna be a big reason they'll be able to contend for the next little while, and even just going down the team. Pascal Siakam. I mean, you're a Toronto fan. I don't have to tell you that he's good at basketball. Like he's gonna be a good second or third star for this team for however long he chooses to stay there. Miles Turner, great defensive center, and then obviously in the playoffs, at least I can't say I knew his name very much before this run.
Yeah,
Andrew Nemhard, I believe is how you say it, had an absolutely insane run towards the end there once Halliburton went out. I had it right in front of me. I'll pull it up again. He in the game 3 he was able to score 32 points, and then in game 4 he scored 24. Both were team highs, which is very impressive that he was able to step up right when the team needed him. Also getting both 9 assists and 10 assists in those games respectively. Just an insane run for him. If he continues to show out for them, I think they've got a lot of good things going for them. I think I like what I see. I mean, even going down their just depth chart. TJ McConnell, great backup point guard. Obi Toppin, who I honestly forgot about, but was a great prospect at one point for, I believe, the Knicks. Like, there's a lot to like about this team for the future, and I think that's the one thing that really sticks out to me is the future. This team was not expected to go where they went this season, and they shocked a lot of people, and I don't think people will be as shocked when they do similar next season and the season after that. I just think, at more than anything, I think this team is absolutely ready. I think they're done being in the basement. I think when they made that trade for Pascal Siakam, they absolutely made a statement to the entire NBA, and this is them kind of showing exactly that trade was was a sign that you should be worried. It wasn't a fluke. I don't think this season will be a fluke. I think they're going to continue to be good for the next little while.
Yeah, and I think when you have a player like Halliburton, I think you're gonna be good no matter what. I think he immediately brings up your floor to a certain extent. And yeah, I think they've got a lot of great depth pieces. I think they've got a lot of great developing talent. It's a lot of young pieces. Like Nemhard, I believe, is a second-year player. To see this kind of performance in the playoffs against the Celtics, like without your star player on the floor, like I believe he was the top point getter in their last game, game 4. I think he got 24. Was I believe the number?
Yep. No, I think that's right.
But yeah, like that's an insane performance to see, and like to kind of see that development continue, and maybe he starts to make more of a name for himself, where guys like us who are more casual basketball fans kind of perk their eyes up and go like, who the hell is this guy? Yeah, exactly. I think that yeah, it's really promising. I think the big thing, and you look up the Pacers on the old Google machine right now, and one of the big headlines is and as it should be, is will they be able to re-sign Pascal Siakam?
Yeah.
The headline a day ago was a quote from Halliburton saying he will do everything in my power to make sure that Siakam re-signs with the Pacers. So obviously it's going to be a pretty decent contract, but I think at this point, with the type of player that Siakam's proven himself to be, not just with the Pacers, but obviously with his time with the Raptors, I think you have to get that done.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And in order to keep this train kind of rolling, because as much as you need young talent, I think having a more veteran presence like Siakam, obviously Siakam's not like old or anything, but more of a veteran experience presence like Siakam in the room, I think is really important.
Yep, and I completely agree with that. I just think more than anything, actually, I just think if you lose Siakam here, who's your second scorer is kind of what sticks out to me. Like and that's not a diss at the rest of the Pacers. Like I said, I like a lot about what I see from their depth. They have multiple players above 12 points on the season, like just going through their regular season stats. They clearly have people who can score, but to me, it's the next guy on that list, I guess, becomes Miles Turner, but I don't see him replacing I don't think he fills that Siakam slot as well. And then at that end, who fills in the next guy and the next guy and the next guy and all that. But it's at the end of the day, I think losing Siakam would be such a huge loss for this team, especially he was their leader in points in the playoffs. He was their leader in points in the regular season. It's very clear that he is that guy. He's the guy that they can rely on when they need somebody who can score this season. I mean, Halliburton, as good as he is, he's your point guard. He's pass first. He had almost 11 assists on the season per game. Like it's at the end of the day, you want someone elite that he can be hitting with those passes, and I think this season it was Siakam, and preferably in the future it's going to continue to be Siakam. But if you lose him, that gets a lot harder, and all of a sudden the pressure's a lot more on Halliburton, I think, to really, really up his scoring, because not to say that he's a poor scorer, but I mean, you want somebody else is kind of what I mean. I think you want to just add to that, because as good as a elite point guard can get you, you need someone who that elite point guard can hit for scorers. And I think that Siakam is that guy. And as much young talent as they have, they are not ready to replace a guy like Siakam quite yet.
Yeah. I would definitely agree. And I think I won't claim this point for myself, because this is something I saw in the score article that they have about the Pacers. Don't have it in front of me, but one of the points they made is I believe Halliburton had a hamstring strain a lot of the second half of the season. So they were saying in this article, we haven't necessarily seen this duo up to full health on Halliburton's part. So I think even obviously to all the points you just made as to why you keep Siakam, but I think you do it also just to see what the duo can operate at full potential, having an off season together, because obviously a mid-season acquisition, like having a full season to kind of grow and help this team mature, because you want to continue this momentum. While obviously the Pacers aren't going to be happy that they lost in the conference finals, I think you can't be disappointed with it. It's a lot farther than anybody would have expected you to go as a 6th seed. So I think you just have to keep continuing that momentum. And if you lose Siakam, I think that stops a lot of that. I think if we want to, because they're 47-35. That is, I mean, it's in a three-way tie for fifth. They ended up sixth out of that deal. That they were also tied with the 76ers, who went in the play-in game. But I'm looking at this. They finished behind, obviously, the Celtics, Knicks, Bucks, Cavs, and Magic. Do you see them moving up in the standings regular season wise next year?
Ooh, that is a good question. I think if they keep Siakam, yes. I do think this is just a start. You also got to think about the fact that they got Siakam, I believe, halfway through the year. So I think, assuming we get to see a full season out of Siakam and Halliburton, I think absolutely I think they absolutely could get a lot better. And I don't know. It'll be cool to see. I think they're going to be the team to watch for the next little while, and I know I'm excited for them, but I don't know. They're a cool team to see. I'm a big fan of Halliburton more than anything else.
Yeah,
I think. He's a very fun player to watch. He's got an interesting jump shot, which makes me like him. So as a whole, I think I've watched his career a little bit. He's a fun player to watch. So I think
as a casual basketball fan, it's like the Pacers and I think the Kings too, which obviously Halliburton's former team, that I think have been the two teams that like excite me a lot in terms of like who I'm gonna put on to watch. The Kings more so last year. I kind of fell off a little bit. But I think, especially with Halliburton and bringing in Siakam, as you kind of referred to me as a Toronto fan. I don't know if I'd quite go that far. I'm the most casual.
You're a Supersonics fan. That's what you are.
Exactly. I am a Canadian citizen, so when the Raptors do good, I'm not gonna be mad about it. But obviously, the Raptors are the center of attention here, so I liked Siakam going into this, so I think that pairing is awesome. So putting on a couple Pacers games this year, just being like, this is an exciting team, and I'm excited to see where they'll go, just like you said. I think if you are a Pacers fan, like you've got to be disappointed in this result, but I think just like thrilled for the future.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, you have to be. I think because your young star is continuing to show how elite of a point guard he's going to continue to be. And you've got a guy who could potentially be that number 2 for him. I think in a lot of years, and history shows that that's sometimes all you need, especially if both of them can play up to their potential. I mean, we'll just have to see what happens with it, because they have a lot of guys around them as well. It's not like it's not like they've only got Siakam and Halliburton and a bunch of depth guys. A lot of those depth guys absolutely are skilled too, and they've built a really good team there in Indiana. And I do think the NBA is better off when Indiana is playing well. I think of like those Paul George teams that went to a couple Eastern Conferences against LeBron, and I think maybe it was only Miami. I think it was only Miami, but nonetheless, like I think of those teams. Whenever we've had Indiana playing in those big games, it's always been fun to watch, and I think that has been sort of passed on from that Paul George era back into this era of Indiana Pacers basketball, and I'm all for it. I think it's awesome. I think they're a fun team to watch, not necessarily in the biggest market, and I think that just makes it that much better as well. So for me, I'm all for it. I think it's clear you're all for it too, Caleb. So I think as a whole, it's pretty cool to see.